Powered by the Montana Television Network. This is the 10 o'clock news on Q2, Montana's news leader.
Good evening, I'm Russ Riesinger. Thanks for joining us on your Friday night. The coronavirus outbreak has now claimed more than 37,000 lives in the United States, including the first death now here in Yellowstone County. The county's Unified Command says the man who was in his 50s died this morning at a Billings hospital. We don't know any other details about the man's health before contracting COVID-19. This brings the total number of deaths in the state to 10. County Health Director John Felton called it a tragic loss of life from a truly horrible disease which none of us have immunity. Also this afternoon, we learned that Cascade County lost its first patient, a woman over the age of 65. The number of confirmed cases here in Montana is 422 as of midnight last night. And the states around Montana have seen significant increases this week. Wyoming became the last state in the country to hit 300 confirmed cases. More than half have recovered. Idaho now has more than 1,500 cases and 42 deaths. North Dakota reports 46 new cases just today and passed Montana for the first time in total number of cases. And South Dakota saw a big increase this week with a virus outbreak at a pork processing plant.
I'm tired of this. Montanans are tired of this. I know as a parent, I'm tired of this.
Governor Bullock said today he is working on a phased reopening for the state and says action that we've taken early will make a difference in allowing Montana to be able to open long before many other states. But he also made it clear it's going to be a slow process.
By next week, we'll have a deliberate plan for reopening, but that'll also include thoughtful planning in the event that we face any setbacks. It will be a phased reopening. Like the president said yesterday, this is going to be a process. There's several factors that we're taking into consideration. Some of those metrics President Trump laid out himself yesterday, and some of them are unique to Montana.
Bullock says the state must meet 3 benchmarks to begin the phased reopening. First, there must be a sustained reduction in COVID-19 cases for 14 days. Bullock thinks we will meet that. Also, hospitals must be able to treat all patients safely, and Montana must have the capacity to test all people with COVID-19 symptoms.
The president assured me that we'll get the test kits we need, and certainly sure hope that he delivers on that, and I'll be working my hardest to make sure of that. But we also know that in some respects that we've heard promises at times from Washington that haven't always completely materialized. And finally, we want to reopen it in a way to work with our businesses, our public health community, and Main Streets. We want to do it in a way so they will have thought through some of these challenges of what a new reopening might look like, and they'll be prepared.
Bullock says more federal help is on the way for hurting Montanans.
Montana will receive $1.25 billion to respond to the crisis and support governments and Montanans who need it most: small businesses, workers, tribal communities, nonprofits, state and local governments.
A task force is already looking at how that money should best be utilized. We won't find out more about the plan to reopen and when that might actually happen until next week. Yellowstone County Health Officer John Felton spoke with Q2 today after listening to Governor Bullock outline plans for a phased reopening of the state. Now, from a science perspective, Q2's Jay Code asked Felton what it will take to get Montana back open.
A lot of that is related to testing and the number of positive cases. So we need to be able to have aggressive testing capacity, and we need to have seen about a 2-week decline in cases. Now, that doesn't mean, as the governor said a few minutes ago, it doesn't mean that if there's one day that there's a case higher than the day before that we start over. What we're really looking at is trends. We're looking at week over week, and those trends are looking positive. And I think that's what led the governor to make his announcement today that he is developing the first phase of that plan right now. And we expect to see that early to middle of next week.
And you can watch the full interview this weekend on Sunday's Face the State at 6:30 and 9:30 in the morning. Well, the outlook for the rest of the school year remains in question. The stay-at-home order includes all schools remaining closed, but that will need to be updated by next week. School District 2 Superintendent Greg Upham believes the district will continue with distance learning through the remaining of the school year, but administrators are also in discussions to plan what it would be like if school reopened for a few weeks. Phase 1 guidelines from the president's task force encourage schools that are currently closed to remain closed for the rest of the year. The Trump administration unveiled a program to offer relief for food suppliers as it continues to defend the plan to reopen the country against calls for greater federal testing capability. SKYLER Henry's at the White House with more.
The president announced a multi-billion-dollar relief program for U.S. farmers and ranchers.
The program will include direct payments to farmers as well as mass purchases of dairy, meat, and agricultural produce to get that food to the people in need.
Then President Trump bashed what he called false reporting after some governors said the federal government was passing the buck on his three-phase guidelines to gradually reopen the country.
The governors are responsible for testing, and I hope they're going to be able to use this tremendous amount of available capacity that we have.
It's up to the governors. It's up to the states. Well, then provide the funding.
Our best scientists and health experts assess that states today have enough tests to implement the criteria of phase 1 if they choose to do so.
Earlier, President Trump lashed out at congressional Democrats on Twitter, demanding they return to Washington to add more money to the Paycheck Protection Program.
I just don't know why they can't do a quick voice vote and replenish it and give the $250 billion.
Democratic leaders continue negotiations with Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin after funding ran out.
We have said put more money in, but do it in a way so it works for all businesses, not just the larger ones.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says he believes both sides are close to a deal. SKYLER Henry, CBS News, the White House.
Vice President Mike Pence says the administration has sent detailed letters to the nation's governors outlining resources that they've received from FEMA. He says the task force will speak with governors again on Monday. Today, U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue announced the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program will provide $19 billion to provide relief for farmers, ranchers, and consumers. The Montana Ag Network's Lane Nordland has more details on that program.
This new $19 billion program will take several immediate actions to assist farmers, ranchers, and consumers in response to the COVID-19 national emergency.
North Dakota Senator John Hoeven chairs the Senate Agriculture Appropriations Committee. He released a draft version of the plan this evening, and it says USDA will provide $16 billion in direct payments to farmers and ranchers. That includes $9.6 billion for the livestock industry alone. $5.1 billion of that is for cattle, $2.9 billion for dairy, and $1.6 billion for hogs. Other funding includes $3.9 billion for row crop producers, $2.1 billion for specialty crops, and $500 million in allocated funding for other crops. That includes additional livestock funding for lamb, wool, and goat sectors. Producers will receive a single payment determined using two calculations. That includes price losses that occurred from January 1st through April 15th, 2020, with producers compensated for 85% of price loss during that period. The second part of the payment will be expected losses from April 15th through the next 2 quarters and will cover 30% of expected losses. The payment limit is $125,000 per commodity with an overall limit of $250,000 per individual or entity. Now, USDA is expediting the rulemaking process for the direct payment program and expects to begin sign up for the new program in early May and to get payments out to producers by the end of May or early June. Now, sources have told me, just like other COVID funding, it will be a first come, first served basis for funding priorities. Again, that enrollment date has yet to be released. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Lane. In addition, USDA will use $3 billion to purchase agriculture products, including meat, dairy, and produce from farmers. They'll deliver that food to food banks as well as community and faith-based organizations to provide to those in need. Protesters are planning to rally against the stay-at-home order and business closures at the state capitol in Helena Sunday. The demonstration comes after similar protests in Michigan, Kentucky, and Ohio. Now, the state is not issuing Capitol event permits at this time, so the protesters are planning to walk around the Capitol on the sidewalk. Helena police met with organizers of that rally yesterday to discuss what they had planned and what's expected of protesters in regards to social distancing and safety. Police Chief Steve Hagan asked that anyone attending this rally be respectful of others and of differing opinions.
Everybody involved is a little bit anxious, and just show some respect. The only time we're going to be involved is if it becomes a dangerous situation or they're violating that social distancing. We'll go and give them the warning like we would with any other group of people.
One of the summer's highest profile events now affected by the coronavirus as well. Relay for Life, the annual fundraising effort for the American Cancer Society, will not have a public event at the West High Track. Organizers are trying to come up with an event for July 10th so the community can recognize cancer survivors and support fundraising for a cancer cure. Hate to see that, Bob. We've got one of the top fundraising events, I think, in the entire nation here at Billings. I know you've been out there. Janelle and I were out there last year as well.
Yeah, you were hosting it last year.
Yeah. And, boy, I tell you what, the weather warming up a little bit. People might be getting an idea to start digging outside.
Oh, yeah, and the grass is starting to green up. And you're thinking, hey, maybe it's time to get out there because you got nothing else to do but watch TV at home, right? Well, there's some dates you need to know about, and that's what we call the average last frost and the average last hard freeze. If you want to put water in your sprinkler system, think about this for a second. The Billings average last freeze is May 7th, and the Billings average last frost is May 18th. And when it comes to the last snowfall, if it's cold enough for a hard freeze or cold enough for a last frost, well, I tell you what, it's cold enough to snow. Of course, the latest hard freeze and the latest last frost, believe it or not, is actually all the way up in June 13th for both of them. So we're not quite ready yet for you to go out there and do a lot of heavy yard work. Just sit back and enjoy it for a little while. We'll have your weekend forecast in a few minutes.
Thanks, Bob. Employees at the Billings Family YMCA say they continue to provide child care for families of essential workers. In fact, they tell us more room is available. The size of the Y's child care operations has decreased considerably since the closure of many Montana businesses due to Governor Bullock's directive to stay at home. However, care is still available for kids of essential workers. We're told the staff has 3 Y workers for every 10 kids, and the mission each day is to enrich and learn.
We have a tech center, and so we're able to use our iPads and our computers and help these kiddos with their homework. I know they do that a couple times a day. Try to get through all of that. The staff that we have currently working, the majority are education majors here in college.
And the Y team tells us both the staff and kids undergo daily temperature checks, and there are still scholarships for care available. Still to come on tonight's 10 o'clock news, Campaign 2020 definitely heating up. We're going to take a closer look at the Democratic candidates for state auditor. Then a little later in sports, everyone needs a good laugh right now, and no better man to deliver just that than Montana's favorite rodeo clown. We'll catch up with him in a bit.
You're watching MTN News with Janelle Slade and Russ Riesinger. Storm Tracker weather with Bob McGuire. And sports with Scott Breen. This is the 10 o'clock news on Q2, Montana's news leader.